Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to Round 10 coverage of the 2015 U.S. Women's Chess Championship. From Round 10, I selected this game between Katerina Nemcova with the white pieces and Nazi Paikidze with the black pieces. Katerina Nemcova is a recent emigre from the Czech Republic, where she was quite a strong player for many years. And she's competed in the U.S. Championship before. She did pretty well last year, and in this championship she's been leading. In fact, just in the previous round, Irina Krush managed to tie her, so she's still fighting for the championship in this game. And her opponent, Nazi Paikidze, has been having a good tournament as well. We looked at one of her games earlier. So let's check it out. Katerina kicks off with e4, and Paikidze replies c6. So we get the Caro-Kann defense, and this is the main line, d4, d5. Now knight d2. Actually, knight c3 is a little more popular. There's also the advanced variation with e5. But knight d2 is a respectable way to play. It does avoid some potential pins along this diagonal. But in the main line, it turns out to be the same, because the main line is exchanging the pawn, and it wouldn't have mattered if the knight had come from either c3 or d2. We get to the same position. So bishop f5, this is a main line of the Caro-Kann. The knight drops back, kicking the bishop drops back. And now we get an unusual move. The main line continues with the very funny move, if you haven't seen it before, h4, to be followed up by h5. And black usually plays h6 and retreats the bishop to h7. So the bishop gets chased all the way back to a hole on h7, and then white's bishop comes out here to d3 to oppose it. Kind of a funny sequence if you haven't seen it before. And it's hard to see the point at first, but the idea is that white has gained a lot of space on the queen side and then gotten rid of this light squared bishop, which is pretty powerful outside the pawn chain. But Paikidze has a different idea, and we'll see it unfold in the game. She plays knight h3. This is not a novelty, but just an unusual way to play it. Knight to f6. And bishop to c4. Now this is getting into very rare territory. Usually when the knight goes to h3, it then follows up with knight to f4, with the idea of just trading off that light squared bishop and gaining the bishop pair. But bishop c4 was played, e6, setting up a pawn structure on the light squares with this bishop outside it. In a way, the Caro-Kann defense is somewhat like the French defense, where a solid light-colored pawn structure is set up, and this is a good bishop. But this bishop has been rescued. Instead of being back on c8, it's been moved outside the pawn chain. But it's a bit slow, and white has a lead in development in the Caro-Kann. So typical kind of trade-offs. Okay, white castles here. And bishop to e7 is played. And now we see the idea. Instead of playing knight to f4, Paikidze has the idea of pawn to f4. And this pawn is going to be pushed forward to disrupt the kingside pawn structure at some point. So queen to d7. Now the king goes to h1 before engaging in any action. The king is moved to a slightly safer location. Black castles. Also perhaps waiting for black to castle before making any committal moves. Bishop to e3. And now c5. Black strikes first, trying to undermine this central pawn. But white ignores this. It's not a threat that needs to be dealt with immediately. The pawn is defended. And she goes ahead. Katerina plays f5, going ahead with her own plans. So this can be taken with the pawn, but Nazi Paikidze decides to take with the bishop, and we allow this exchange. So giving up the bishop pair, and now d takes c5 is played. So white has won a pawn over here on the queen side, and black has won a pawn on the king side. And we have a very unbalanced structure. We have 4 pawns against 2 over here, and 4 pawns against 2 in favor of white on the queen side. Black continues with knight g4, kicking the bishop, and the bishop drops back to g1, defending. So you might think that black is going to attack on the king side with the extra pawn advantage, but any pawn pushes would, of course, weaken the king position, and this bishop here is already exerting some influence, so it seems to have a pretty strong role in this game, at least for the next few moves. So g6 was played, just shoring up things on the king side a bit and not making any big commitments. Bishop to d5 is played, blocking this diagonal and preparing the move c4. This turns out to be a great central location for this bishop. Really a good-looking piece here. Queen to c7, taking a look at the h7 square, but the bishop has got this securely defended, even though the knight and the queen are coordinating. It's also attacking the c-pawn, so b4 was played to defend that. And now the final piece develops, knight to c6, getting the last piece out, and rook to b1. The knight was attacking the b-pawn, so the rook defends it. Rook a to d1, challenging the bishop on this open d file, and it looks like an awkward pin at first, but white can just play the move c4. And once again, this bishop continues to be a strong piece. It can't be chased away by pawns. Only other pieces can chase it away, and it'll take a while to arrange that. There's no piece that can immediately oppose it. So first, black plays b6, trying to undermine this pawn structure here on the queen side. The knight comes to f4 now, and has a dual purpose. It's looking towards the center, defending the bishop, and also looking towards the king side here, with perhaps ideas of sacrificing and a king side attack. So b takes c5, b takes c5 is played, and rook to b8, challenging the rook on the b file. Katerina decides to go ahead and trade the rooks off. The rooks come off. Cancel that. I'm sorry. Nazi Paikidze takes back with the knight. I guess wanting to leave the rook over here for defense of the king side. h3, kicking this knight away. It goes to e5. And now rook to e1, looking at this open e file and indirectly putting pressure on these pieces. The bishop goes to h4, hitting the rook, and the rook stays on the e file, goes to e2. Now the knight comes out, knight b to c6. Notice the knights are nicely defending each other here. And at this point, Katerina makes the decision to trade off that bishop. So this bishop has been sitting here looking like a strong piece, exerting influence on the king side. But, well, in order to make progress, she decides it's better to trade it. And watch what happens after bishop takes, knight takes. First of all, she comes in with the queen to d6. That's a strong move because black can't really take the queen. It would just bring a pawn forward and give white a pair of advanced passed pawns that defend each other, and that would be very dangerous in the endgame, probably losing. So the queen has to drop back. Queen goes to c8, and now knight d5. So where the bishop was, we now have two pieces, both the queen and the knight is looking very menacingly at the f6 square, which at the moment is guarded by this bishop on h4. So an interesting configuration. Rook to e8 was played, try and relieve some pressure on the e file. We have this exchange. And then right here, so up to this point, Katerina has built up a pretty significant advantage, but the next move actually lets the advantage slip away. So the best way to continue is probably the move bishop to e3. So the bishop just comes out to a good square, also blocks the queen from getting to the back rank for the moment. And there may be ideas of coming in on the dark squares and putting some more pressure on the king in this way. So that it would be a long game from here. There's no direct line that's winning, but it keeps an edge for white. White can keep putting pressure on black's king, and it's important to do that. In the long run, if all the pieces were to disappear, these are kind of weak pawns over here, although they're advanced, so I have to qualify that. If all the pieces were to disappear, I guess this pawn would become queen. But if black can stop this pawn, then these pawns are a little bit weaker than black's corresponding pawns. So I think black has an endgame edge. So white wants to keep the pieces on and play for the attack on the king, and it looks like if she can keep the pressure up, she should have good chances there. So instead, she played the move knight to c7, which it's just trying to maneuver the knight around, getting to a better attacking position. And the knight and the queen, of course, as we saw in a previous game, make a very good attacking duo. But well, it allows black to get some counter chances. Black's queen comes in, it escapes the back rank, comes in with e4. And taking a look at the c-pawn and maybe with ideas of going to the back rank. The queen comes back to d5, once again offering the queen trade, which is not not desirable. Once again, if the queen were to take, the pawn would take back, and this pawn duo would probably decide the game. So neither side wants to trade queens at this point. Paikidze drops her bishop back to, puts her bishop forward to g3, taking away squares from the white king. And now the knight comes to b5. I guess this was one of the ideas, was to maneuver the knight around. Maybe the knight can get into this the square on d6 and coordinate against the f7 pawn. Before the knight gets there, queen to e1 is played, and now there's some big threats. This bishop is pinned, and the king can't unpin it easily. The king has no moves because they're taken away by the bishop. And so there's a big threat of just bishop to f2 and checkmate on g1, and it's very difficult to deal with that threat. And what Paikidze played, what Nemcova played, was she continued with her plan of knight d6. That's when she started that knight maneuver. That was probably the goal she had in mind. And at move 32, she might have been a little bit low on time, but that is, in fact, a losing move. And it's very difficult to calculate the corresponding sequence. But having given you the hint that that move loses, can you find a move that saves the game? Basically, the best that white can hope for is a draw in this position, but it is still possible to hold a draw, but only with one move. So if you want a chance to pause the video, see if you can find that key defensive move in this situation, keeping in mind the threat of just bishop to f2 and checkmate on g1. Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. The move that defends is knight to d4. So if the knight comes to d4, and bishop to f2 is played, then just knight to f3 not only defends the bishop but also kicks the queen, and actually white is in really good shape in this position. The queen goes back to e8 is a computer recommendation, and bishop takes f2, so losing the piece. If black tries to hold on to the piece, say with queen to c1, then queen takes c6, picking up the knight. So too many threats to deal with. So after knight to d4, black is forced to trade the knight. Knight takes, queen takes. Now the queen defends the bishop, and the position is even. 0-0-0 is the chess engine evaluation. Neither side can checkmate the other. The threats are too dangerous. So I guess... in fact, I have to wonder what would happen. It is black's move here. I was just thinking, it seems like white has a plan of just promoting this pawn, and how does black stop it? So suppose black plays f4, and white goes on with c6. What's the idea? f3. So it's just super dangerous, huh? This check here. So is there no time to play c7? Oh, the bishop defends against c7. And if the queen comes in to this square, then f2 is winning. Okay, so in this position, queen to d8 check is played. And I guess just going for a perpetual check, king g7, queen d4 check, and that's how it ends in a draw. So that's the way to defend that position. Anyway, knight to d6 was played, continuing the attack. And like I said, it's not at all obvious, and it would take a lot to calculate this whole sequence in time control. But it turns out that, first of all, knight to e5 is played to defend the f7 pawn and put an immediate stop to that threat. But then queen a8 check. The thing is that white gets a whole bunch of checks. And king goes to g7. Knight comes in with e8 check. The king goes to h6. And now knight to f6. There was no more check. The knight needed to get out of the way for the queen to come in, so there were no checks at that point. And now finally black has a moment to play her move, and she can play bishop f2. And at this point the writing is on the wall after the checks run out, which takes a little while. Queen f8 check, king goes to g5, knight takes h7 check, king goes to f4, queen to h6 check, king goes to e4, knight to g5 check, king goes to d3, And finally, there's no more checks. And so Katerina resigns. So a loss for Katerina. And Irina Krush won her game in this round. So now Krush is leading the tournament at 8 points. Katerina Nemcova at 7 points is tied with Nazi Paikidze, the winner of this game, also at 7 points. So the three of them are still in contention going into the final round. And in fact, Nemcova plays Krush in the last round, round 11. So if she can defeat Krush, she can at least tie for first place. But Irina Krush just needs a draw or a win to seal her additional, her yet again another championship. She's won the championship many times before. So I'll give you the exact number when I do the round 11 coverage. I will see you then. Bye.